Okay, these logs are firewood. They've been seasoned and they've been placed at the end of a summer when the wood is seasoned and dry inside a nice dry well ventilated store. So these are ready to burn. They'll burn nice and clean, they'll burn nice and hot, and the amount of pollutants they give out will be fairly low. See the nearer of those two stacks? My wood burner's running on this nice frosty morning, and you can hardly tell that it is running. That's what it should be. So when I say seasoned, basically I think of seasoning or preparing your timber for burning as being in two parts. Getting rid of the live water, the water which is in the freshly felled tree, which the tree uses for its life processes, stuff like photosynthesis and respiration, and also building up more firewood and growing, and drying, which starts to happen after seasoning is finished. So after the wood is actually dead, and it'll stay alive for quite some time as trees are very tenacious, and the bark, whilst it's alive and during that first bit of seasoning, will actually be waterproof because it's basically evolved to keep the moisture in the tree so that the tree doesn't suffer dehydration and die for that reason. Once the thing's dead and the bark is dead, the bark then stops being waterproof, although it retains some of its waterproofness, and you then start getting into drying. Seasoning and drying can overlap, so this stuff, this sort of size, you can see how big it is. This is ideal as log size. I do this in 5 foot lengths, cut it, stack it before the end of the winter, and leave it out over the summer and the spring. By the end of the summer it's dead, seasoning has finished, and it's also well along the road to being dry. I then bring it back here, cut it and stack it. So the difference between seasoning, in my mind, and drying. Seasoning, of course, and drying overlap, and you can mosh them all up together, especially if you've got big rounds of timber, by splitting it down, and then you can stack it outside over the summer, and you get seasoning and drying all happening at once. A lot of people just call that seasoning. Of course, if you leave your timber out, in my case in a cord in 5 foot lengths, after the end of the summer, then the autumn and winter rains fall on it and it takes up moisture. It becomes less dry, it gets wetter. So this is how I season my firewood. So it's in a cord on the edge of the wood, underneath the eaves of the wood, which is along here. But this, believe it or not, is a lot more breezy than it is further in, even after I've cut an area coppice, as in there. The woodland basically, because of edge effects and other things, has its own microclimate. So this catches the breeze, you can see the ivy leaves swaying. So it'll sit here until the end of the summer. And you see it's all fresh felled. And it's wet with snow, which is melting. But you can see the difference between this cord, which is stuff fresh felled this year, and this cord, which was felled this time last year. And this has been up here for a year, well, just on a year now, so one summer, and it'll come out at the end of this summer. This timber was actually dry at the end of the summer. This is showing this black discoloration all the way over it, and this is where fungi have already started to multiply on the ends of the wood. Where they've got further in, such as this one, this was probably dead when it was felled, and this one has got fungal fruiting bodies on it. See how that looks different from the snow? So that will have made its way well into here. This is probably the same individual fungus, individual mycelium, more all the way through here. But most of the timber will be sound, and when it's dry it'll burn nice and clean. Let's have a look at these ones. The first ones I cut are these ones here. And you can see that they're already getting little black spots on them. So that's moulds and rusts starting to work. Or moulds rather than rusts. Rusts only live in live material. And this is probably live, but well, we won't go there. That'll just stay in the end and won't be able to get very far in by the end of the summer, because hopefully come April time it'll start to really dry out. This will lose moisture slowly through the bark because the bark is still alive at this stage. Let's get my knife out, essential tool for working in the woods. And look, and you can see here, see the green? This is chlorophyll just under the bark, and that is still going to be photosynthesizing when it's warm enough. And this is cambium and phloem underneath. Phloem is the ring of live tissue under the bark which flows, photosynthate from the leaves down towards the roots to keep the roots alive and to keep them pumping, inverted commas, water up to the top of the tree for carrying nutrients. Here's a tip to speed up seasoning, especially if you're seasoning in a length like this for firewood. I wouldn't do it if I was seasoning for timber, but this is kind of small for timber anyway. It's called striping. And basically, as you're working up the tree from the base towards the tip, you can see all the brash laying there where it's been cut off. And you can imagine with the eye of faith, I've moved some of the bits, but the trunk lying as it falls. You stick a stripe up it. Now as it happens, I measure as I go up, so that's a chainsaw length to there, see where the tip's been? Second chainsaw length to there, then I cut it, and the same again. And I only bother doing this with the biggest ones, so the smaller bits I don't bother with. But if you can imagine seasoning something the size of that one, something the size of that one, and wanting them to be seasoned and starting to dry by the end of the summer, then if you can speed up the drying of the bigger bits, then so much the better. And I'll probably roll this as I work around the wood and put another stripe down the back edge. Why do I do that? Well, as you probably heard me say before, I've just felled this tree and it's still alive. And this will stay alive, the cells will stay alive in here for quite some time, because trees are extremely resilient. If you scrape the bark with a knife or a billhook, you can see that just under the surface there's green, and in here this is chlorophyll. So as long as this gets sunlight, this can make its own food. It's limited by the amount of water that's actually in it, but there's a lot of water locked up in here, so it can stay alive for quite a considerable period of time. And seasoning, of course, is getting rid of this life water, the water that's in here and sort of encapsulated in here by the bark, which is waterproof. Once that life water's gone, then you can start to dry it. So there's like two components in preparing your logs. And if you're seasoning in the round, then getting rid of the life water is a lot slower than if you split it. But if I split all these into little bits this size up in here, then I'll never be able to get them out, because I haven't got four-wheel drive and there's no vehicle access into here for a four-wheel drive. If I've got a tractor and a trailer, then I'll basically be able to stick the logs in the tractor and trailer, trundle them off to the yard down the bottom of the farm, and then offload them into my vehicle to take them home, which is like handling it several times, each individual piece. So I season in a length like this. So if you strike the bark, you break the seal of the bark, you allow the life water to be removed by drying from the piece of timber, and that first stage of drying is called seasoning, because it takes more than a season to do. Okay, so striping, you see I've done this one here. The next one I haven't bothered with. So these big ones here, these first three have all been striped twice. Once on this side, once on t'other side. That's been striped twice on kind of the same side as is that one. It doesn't really matter. And how you do it is with the chainsaw running and both hands on the saw. Use that quadrant of the bar. and you just run it along while it's running. And that's all there is to it.